Thank you, Blackstone Valley Historical Committee, for having me here. It's an honor to be with all of you here today. I already had some pretty cool conversations to start out with. And again, as Julie pointed out, unfortunately, I've been doing these kind of events for almost 30 years now, and it's always great to have the chat and conversation after, but unfortunately after that it's just kind of everybody go home thing, and I won't be able to chat due to COVID, and we all have to keep safe, and we have a president in the hospital right now, and so it's a big reminder that nobody's safe and we all need to be careful, and I certainly intend to do my part in that regard. So with that being said, once again, it's a real honor to be here. I just introduced myself in my Nipmuc language, and I just want to say the most important thing I can do right now is speak in that first language of the land, that first language that we all are reminded of, the trees, this river here that we call the Blackstone River, the grass, the wind, all the things around us. Remember those words, because this is the language that was first spoken here for millennia. And then we say in that language, "Wu nashiao na tumo manatu, tabatni, watu chikinnisin, okumis, tabatni wuchi sapasu, usukati ehuana, notas nino manantio, king nuta yio pandamino, and the mayo nino maquantam kichia, ka mata wananta, ka nagutie kukuta nino, manatu, usukati ehuana, o manatetio, ka noso komusu amoke. I greet you in the words of the Algonquin Nipmuc language, greetings of peace, greetings of reciprocity, greetings of understanding, and that our ancestors would come and share this space with us. And I also said that I would ask that we would have this reciprocity where we would exchange, interrelate in ways that we both are not a transactional relationship, but a relationship where we both come out more whole, more complete, a better understanding of each other. And that's truly what the foundations of indigenous spirituality and culture is about. And it starts right here. And many times when I'm out sharing, the drum, as we so admirably share all the time, is that it is the heartbeat of Mother Earth. And the reason why we say that is that my grandfather told me long time ago, and I've shared it many times. He says if we look out around America or wherever we are, we'll see people of different colors, different nationalities, different genders. Some people have a head full of hair, some people have no hair, but on the inside, everybody is doing this. And so this makes it real easy to understand and to see a human being before you. When you're not looking at all the exterior, you're remembering and you're reminded that they have a heartbeat. So you're talking to a heartbeat just like you have. And when you connect in that intimate way, the whole thing just changes how you relate to somebody. And so with that, I would share this Nipmuc welcoming song. I hope that that song and that drum resonated in your spirit in a good way, and that you could reflect that goodness that I feel when I sing. The drum is so intimate to our people, and it's a really important part. And the vibrations are the essence of the universe, of Mother Earth, and all the things that are around us, because everything is vibrations. And with that, speaking of vibrations, I have another song I'd like to share with you. And this type of song that we call here the Eastern, and I'll get into all this in a little bit. The Nipmuc people, which means people of the fresh water, we're what we refer to as the Eastern Woodland Tribes. And the Eastern Woodland Tribes have a specific style of music. One is the water drum and hand drums, and sometimes we use what we call the powwow drum, but very specifically we share what we call these longhouse songs, because we did not live in teepees. Every now and then somebody will say, well, you live in a teepee? I says, no! Those are other tribes that lived in the teepee. We lived in longhouses, wigwams, and weetus, much different. But anyhow, in those longhouses, we would have songs that the grandmas and grandpas and uncles and everybody would sing, and it would go on for a long time. But also these songs would translate into spaces that were our highways. And the Blackstone River is one great example, because it's far more than just a river. It's our sustenance. It was our way of travel and trade and communication. It was our life. Some of you may be familiar with that term that you heard, water is life. Well, this song here is in our language, and this is what we call a mashun song, or a paddle song. So as we were in that mashun, or we say in English canoe, we would be singing songs like this. Yahweh, 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 la. Yana, we, yana, we, yana. Ayana, we, yana, we, yana. Yana, we, yana, we, yana. Ayana, we, yana, we, yana. Yahweh, 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 la. Nipiyam, nuwichin, Yahweh, Nipikiti, nuwichin, one. Chemoche, monake, chemoche, monake, chemoche, monake, Yahweh, 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 Yahweh. Nipiyam, nuwichin, Yahweh, Nipikiti, nuwichin, one. Chemoche, monake, chemoche, monake, chemoche, monake, Yahweh. Good job. Thank you. Okay, time's flying already. And that's what we, as I said, it's a paddle song. These thermoses are really great. That's still hot. It's been in there for about an hour now. Whoa. So a little bit about me. For those who don't know, again, my name is Larry Spotted Crow Mann, from the Nipmuc Nation, which is the indigenous people of this land, and it's a real beautiful feeling, and I even have to just take pause and take it in. Whenever I get to share in spaces of my ancestors, it's humbling, because I'm sitting here in space where for a long time they were denied the right to exist and be who they are. They were denied the right to just live and be Native people. And here I am now in 2020, their great descendant, and sharing about them. And so I stand on the shoulders of giants. I stand on the shoulders, and I represent them in the words that I say, and I speak for them, for the voiceless, for my ancestors. And so it's humbling, and it's very important that, and when I do share, it's in a good way, in a very positive way, that their message and their voice is remembered. I'm a culture educator for my tribe, historian, a writer, won a few awards, a poet. I've also worked in education for about 15 years. I recently, I guess I could say retired, because I kind of got out of that field. I've worked at the Grafton Job Corps with teens for about a decade, academic and trade school. But one of the most significant parts of my work has been working with Native American youth in drug and alcohol prevention. It's a real passion of mine to heal and help prevent and really engender positive insights into people who have suffered disproportionately due to many hardships that they have had to endure. And many times I don't really have time to go into too much here, but I share my own story, my own struggles with addiction as a child, because of some of the situations of indigenous peoples going through hardships where we're like 5 times more likely to commit suicide, 5 times more likely to not have adequate health care, and it's just across the board, the inequities. And so being a product of that, this is why you see the staggering rates of suicide and all these different things. For example, in 2014 and to 2016, right here in Massachusetts, 24 Native American teens lost their lives to suicide or overdose. That's a span of 2 years that we were losing 1 child a month for 2 years. Again, all this stems back to not feeling like you belong, not feeling like you're a part of the story. And that's really the center of my talk today, is about we are story. We are story, we are the land. And that's really the base of how we see ourselves, right? What story are we telling ourselves? What story do you tell yourselves about who you are? Or what story do you think about when we think about this country? And so those are important key components that have really shaped the narrative of our psyche, of our process, of how we conceptualize what we see out there and how it translates into what happens in here. And again, we see that in disproportionately Native communities and people of color. So I have shared this work, as I said, almost 3 decades now. I've had the privilege of speaking in different parts of the world, from Sweden to Iceland and Greenland and other Faroe Islands, different parts of Europe, all over Canada. Just before COVID hit, I was in Ecuador for over a month. Had an amazing time, other than getting the altitude sickness up in the Andes, 8,000 feet. I was not prepared for that. I got to tell you, I could go off on a tangent about that. I spoke at the University of Cuenca, which was 8,000 feet above sea level, and they really had to keep me afloat, man. It was struggling. It was hard. I never got used to it, and I think I kind of ruined my opportunity to ever go up high again, because it was just a really tough experience. But other than that, if you ever get to go to Ecuador, it's just an amazing place. The coastlines are just absolutely sublime, you know. So if I ever go back, it's coastline for me. So it's just an amazing experience to speak in Ecuador. And after that, we were planning to go to Australia and share some more of this work, but of course, everything got canceled because of that. And so that's essentially how I've been able to do the work that I do and share it in spaces like this, whether it's small or large, or talking to school kids or talking in large venues and so on. But it's always important to just share that word, that voice of my ancestors. And let's sip this tea. I got this ginger tea here because me and Julie were talking earlier. You know, one thing that this COVID brought about, and I always like to try to be safe and healthy anyway, but you know, drinking ginger tea and taking healthy things into ourselves, it's all very more. It's just, you know, it's vital and it's important, and it is helpful. But so if we just circle back a little bit about we are story, we are the land. I'd like to just kind of talk a little bit about like where we are right now in this Blackstone area, and it is known for the start of the Industrial Revolution, right, around here, and so this is a proud moment for America when we think about what that Industrial Revolution did. But Native American people, and this is just one example, where we're left out of that story. And so, like when I share about me going to grade school and all that, it was like probably one of the worst times of my life, being a Native American kid in Massachusetts, because growing up in the 70s and 80s, the world was still a lot of racial tension. There was busing, and everything was black or white, and Indians, we were just like, where do we go? Because nobody wanted to talk to us. You know, we were getting it from both sides, and it was really tough. And my oldest brother, his nickname was Injun Joe. And some of you folks are around my age, so you remember the character Injun Joe. He was this villainous, stab crazy kind of Indian guy, and so that's kind of what he was called. And so these kind of pejoratives that represented us and our family didn't really have a positive impact about how we saw ourselves. And so that becomes problematic, again, how we relate to the world. And so moving fast forward, when we think about the Industrial Revolution, where when I say Native American people were left out of that, and all the many other facets of intellectual progress and things that we did were never mentioned. Again, when I was in the classroom, I just kind of felt like, Native American people are just simply hapless bystanders just benefiting from white proximity because we really had nothing to offer. And that was the message I was receiving, and it was really unfortunate because it was just, that was not the story. But that was the story that we were being told. And many people suffered in that, not just Native people, but also America at large. They didn't get to hear the rich and vibrant culture, tradition, intellectual curiosity, the science, the cosmology, the philosophy, the diplomacy, the governance, the monoculture, and all the different things that they lost out on. And there's no way I could get into all of that now, but I go back to the Industrial Revolution because if we ask ourselves, well, what were the key components of how this Industrial Revolution started, right? And there were three: steel, rubber, and petroleum, right? Well, two of those were invented by Native people, and we don't talk about that. Rubber and petroleum was first discovered by indigenous people, and we never get to hear that story. And just knowing something like that as a kid, as a Native child, I could have said, wow, my ancestors contributed to the industry. They were down in South America when the rubber plant was discovered, and the Spanish came down and they were seeing what these natives were doing. Or here in the Iroquois country when they were using petroleum to mend canoes and different things like that. And that's how it was first came to be. Nobody talks about that. And we have to ask why. Or the other story about women's suffrage, how the foundation of that also started nearby. When some of the founders of women's suffrage were very astounded by how free the Native American women were. And they were taking note. You can look this up now. I don't know if too many of the Native women were mentioned, but we know who the suffrage movement women were, Stanton and a few other ones. And so that's talked about. And again, the Native story gets left out of that. I was talking to the gentleman earlier about, he was mentioning he was a veteran. I'm a veteran myself. And I know veterans is a big thing in this area as well. And what people don't mention is that Native American people are the highest enlisted people in the United States military per their population. In other words, more Native Americans have served in the military than any other race combined. And I am no exception. I am a son of the Revolutionary War. I have 2 ancestors and 5 ancestors that served in the Civil War. There were so many of them that at the Mashantucket Pequot Museum, there's a book called From Mashantucket to Appomattox. And being a historian and somebody who loves culture, must have been 10 years ago, I was going through that, combing through some of this research, and I happened to see my ancestors' names in this book, and I was like, holy, this is awesome. I knew they had served, but I didn't know what a profound impact they had on that service. And so my great-great-great-grandfather and then his son were serving at the same time in the Civil War, in the Union Army, in Massachusetts, and the Rhode Island units, and it was pretty astounding. When we see the movie Glory with Denzel Washington, what they don't tell you in that movie is there were Native soldiers also with that regiment. And it's really a fascinating story with my ancestors in the Civil War, because some of them who were like my complexion or a little lighter would serve in the white troops. They were able to go back and forth. And they would get more money serving with the white troops. But then they could go back and forth and be with the brown troops. So it was really interesting how they kind of navigated that world, right? It was just, and I really, and speaking of which, as an aside, I'm going to be doing some play work and with my work with, which I didn't even mention earlier, that I'm also the director of our Nipmuc Cultural Center out in Asheville, Mass, the Okiteo Cultural Center. So that's a really important part. So again, there's just so much to talk to you about. I could easily get sidetracked. But the military aspect is really significant that I want to bring up when we think about the scope as a whole of indigenous people. And what's really tragic about while they were serving down in, I forget where he was now, I think he was in Virginia, and I had he was on a different campaign down there. And again, it was funny, anybody ever seen the movie It's a Civil War movie with Jude Law in it. What's the name? It was a great film. Where all the Civil War soldiers were in that. They got trapped in that pit, and they were like, and they said in the part movie it was like shooting fish in a barrel. There was a scene in that movie. Anybody recall that? It'll come to me probably before I forget. But that was a real that really happened. And one of my great grandfathers was in that scene there. He was in that battle. I forget the name of the battle. Somebody watching this later will probably know. There's a lot of Civil War buffs out there. But anyway, what was really tragic about all that is during his time in the Civil War, they were living in a Nipmuc homeland just a few miles shy from here, the area called Wabaquasit. And while they were my great-great-great-grandma, while she was home, her land was being usurped, and the kids were being put in boarding schools. And that happened for 2 generations where the kids were taken from their homes forcibly because they weren't Christian, they weren't living the way that the state thought they should. And we were considered wards of the state, we weren't even considered citizens until 1924. Native Americans didn't have a right to have ceremonies until 1978. Now, I mean, I was born in '67, so you can just kind of think about, this is well into my lifetime where we didn't have the right to drum and dance without fear of, repercussions. And so it's really astounding and tragic, as I said, is while he's defending freedom in Abraham Lincoln's army, his land and children are being taken away from just because they're Native American. And so I reflect on all this in my work and try to get people to not only understand it, but figure out where do we go from here. And when we think about, more people coming, great. When we think about this, the country right now, the political climate, it's very polarized right now, and we need to find a better way because it's easy for me to be angry and hurt, and I've had many people say, "How do you even deal with it, with all that loss?" Well, I can wallow in anger and bitterness, or I can do something about it. And part of doing something about it is why I do what I do here today, and that's teach and share. And help people to understand, because there are many people who, in my travels, who have empathized and immediately understood, but there are other people who will say things like, "Well, get over it." And those are kind of the people I want to kind of try to reach out to, because it's important that we open up this dialogue. Because like I said, right now there's angry people on both sides, and nobody's listening to each other. And nobody wins. Nobody wins. We all lose. And so what's the point of that? I have mountains of data and information and stories and history that I've learned for 3 decades that I can share, but if somebody's not open up to listen to that, what's the point? If I start talking and you're already thinking of how you're going to come back and knock that story down, what's the point? And when we do that to each other. Canada, South Africa, the apartheid country of South Africa, Australia, and countries such as that have done what they call, on the government level, Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. And what that did was allow people who suffered this historical trauma to talk in open forum about these issues. And everybody would have to listen with an open mind, just kind of try to understand for that moment. America has never done that. And one of the things I say, and many other traditional leaders have suggested, that America needs this open dialogue on race, on culture, on history, about what happened here. And until we do that, I don't think we can get to a better place. Because we end up with different narratives. Because as I was saying earlier, we have 2 stories of America. We have America of promised lands, exceptionalism, God's chosen people, endless resources. And then we have another story of America where a history of genocide, enslavement, Jim Crow laws, segregation, children separated at our borders. So they're like this far apart, right? So who's right and who's wrong? Or maybe there's a piece of that for everybody to understand and share, right? And so this is what we got to do, is bring this together. And until we do that, we're going to continue to have these issues. And so It's already 1:30, and I'm going to just read a short story here from my Drumming and Dreaming book. And I think it's really significant in terms of sharing about that healing power about who we are as a people. And let's find that page. Everybody good? All right. So, I think what I like to do is to read the, well actually I'll hold off on that due to time. But, so, we are a story, we are the land, right? And how we kind of come to terms with that is like reshaping. And so as a traditional storyteller, it's my job to help people see themselves back in this land. The story of Crow has been supplanted by all these different things that we see. The heavens, the skies became Greek. The land became English, right? The constellations are all Greek now. But we had different stories for those stars that are no longer talked about. So if we look up and can't see ourselves in the stars, we can't see ourselves in the mountains, in the rocks, in the water. We're empty vessels. And this is why when Native people say that the land is everything, this is what we're talking about. Our culture is our land, our spirituality is in the land. The trees, the water, and everything. So this story kind of resonates with that. Take another sip of tea. Very warm tea. And I tell you, it's a reciprocal thing for me as well. Every time I get a chance to do this, and again, I traveled all over. I'd love to be out there with the people, but COVID has slowed that down certainly. And so, as I'm sitting here sharing this is healing for me as well. It's that reminder, the importance of all these things. And some of you saw when I come, I'm stressed out. I'm going to tell you, this COVID thing it's got me, the hand sanitizer and all that, But you got to be careful, So we all need to try to keep safe, as best we can, because as I was saying, the spirits around us, whatever people believe in, at the end of the day, it's up to them. We can only do our part. So I'm going to share this story. It's entitled The Three Sisters, the Nipmuc story of the Three Sisters. Anybody ever heard of the Three Sisters? All right, we got some three sisters here. Okay. Long ago it was this way. There were three sisters. Each one very beautiful. But the young girls were very different from each other. One was very tall, slender, and had yellow, smooth hair. The other sister was a little shorter. She had long, curly, shiny brown hair. The third sister was shorter than the other two. Her hair was radiant black, wavy, but also very long. These sisters loved each other very much. But even though they loved each other dearly, these differences brought about arguments amongst them all the time. This endless bickering led them to not spending much time together or wanting to be around each other. Each sister kept to herself unless it was to argue or disagree some more. The mother, their mom, was very upset, as any mom would. She urged them to get along, but the girls refused. So the mother thought for a long time, what could I do? A few days had passed and the three sisters were out in the garden. They were arguing amongst themselves as always, going at it pretty good. And shouting and pointing and shaking their hands in the air. It was not a pretty scene. The mother asked them to stop bickering at once, she shouted. She asked the three sisters, okay, come on, sit down in the garden, sit down beside each other. But the girls were very stubborn. Just as one sister would sit down, the other girl would get up and leave. Then when the other one would come back and sit down, the other sister would walk away. Back and forth it went, back and forth. The three girls not wanting to sit together, not wanting to sit as one. The mother grew very tired of this. Finally, she got them to sit down together in the garden. The mother said, I want you girls to listen. You three sisters are all very special and unique, but you are all also a part of me. Each of you. You need to see the beauty not only in yourself, but each other. The girls frowned, mumbled, cut their eyes, and fidgeted about a little bit. The mother said, I want you to sit here until you make peace. Sit here until you resolve your differences. Then, the mother took each girl's hair and held it gently in her hands. She brought the girls' hairs together, yellow, brown, black hair, and she twisted it all into one beautiful long braid. She told them, "Stay here until you have resolved this quarrel. Once you have come to an accord, unloose the braid. When I see you have undone the braid, I will know you have made peace with one another." The girls sat for a very long time, I'll tell you. The mother returned often to check on them. She noticed that the braid had not been undone. As the girls sat in the garden, that braid began to grow longer and longer. And pretty soon it took root into the ground. And this time, when the mother returned to check on the girls, corn, beans, and squash grew in the spot where her daughters sat. The mother saw this and she was very sad and she cried. Her daughters were gone. She didn't know what to do. But then the plants began to speak to the mother and said, "Do not despair, mother. We have come together in a way that honors our differences, as you have asked of us, and we will always be with you. And what we have, we will share with many generations to come. We shall teach that even with great differences among us, we can come together and share with each other. And when we share with one another, a new strength is born." Sister Corn provided a structure for her sister's beans to climb, eliminating the need for poles. Sister Beans provided nutrients to Mother Earth that helped her sisters grow healthy and strong. Sister Squash spread out along the ground, blocking the sunlight to prevent the weeds from growing on her sisters. And Sister Squash also grew wide leaves that kept moisture in the soil. And she also grew prickly hairs on the end of her vines to deter pests. The three sisters teach us that by sharing with one another, we not only can heal from within, but also become stronger in unity. At the bottom, thank you. So just kind of unpacking that story on so many levels. It does a lot of things to the spirit. And I'm sure you guys, many of you here, that probably resonated certain thoughts with you about different things. And some of the things I'll point out when we talked about, I mentioned monoculture earlier, which is, everybody know what monoculture is, a form of farming where different plants are grown together. So in Western farming techniques, we usually have what we call the monoculture, where there's these vast fields of one item growing. And so then you're going to need the pesticides and you get blight because there's no variety. And so the plants have trouble to survive. So the native people, in this intellectual marvel, thought of the polyculture thousands of years ago with the three sisters. So you have corn, beans, and squash growing together. And by doing that, you don't need the pesticides. And they're also they're putting complex carbohydrates and amino acids that this meal packs in the meal. So it's doing a lot of amazing things for your diet. And it's essential. You don't even need meat essentially with these three items. It's a powerful food source that they engineered. Not to mention, corn was developed over thousands of years. And so you have these two phenomena right here. And then also a big point is where it's empowering women. We're seeing women in this story as in some of the, I love mythology as well. And so a lot of the different myths around the world, you'll see women as villains and different things like that. You don't see them in such roles where they're actually doing these powerful things. And even throughout the Bible, right? It starts off with a woman screwing up the world, as it says. But not in the native stories. Women are many times the saviors because the earth is feminine. And by seeing these three women, you're seeing the power of what these women have done for society. So when you go to the plants, when you go eat your corn and your squash and beans, you're thinking about the power of the femininity side of the universe. And it really changes your perception. And so the story does so many different things on different psychological levels. And it reminds the people, the indigenous people, that they have a part in this narrative. And so just sharing on that, and we're kind of getting close to the end of time already. So, I mean, I could just go on and on and on sharing so many things. But I just wanted to kind of wrap it up there and leave some time, maybe like 20 minutes or so for your questions. And it's really been fun. I know I covered a lot, but I really wanted to try to give the basis of some of the things that are very significant to the Native people. And just real quick before I open up the question, just more about Nipmuc people in general. We're about 3,000 tribal members today, and our community is thriving. One of the biggest struggles that we still have is land, acquiring our land back and resources. So in ways that people can help, you can go to okiteo.org or just reach out to my website. And there are many ways you can reach out and help tribal communities here. That's a big question I get everywhere I go is, how can I get involved? How can I be an ally, an accomplice? And we certainly welcome support. Many of the things that we are doing today is because of the support of non-Native people. It's a big component of who we are today. And many people from all walks of life. And that is one of the benefits I've had from being in, whether it's Greenland or listening to some Nordic chants in Iceland, that people are the same everywhere. It's just a matter of opening up that heart. We're not born with hate, you know, it's something that's learned, and we can unlearn that. And so with that, I'd like to open up with questions. Yes, ma'am.
I would like your thoughts on using Native Americans as mascots. I'm thinking of Mendon with the Nipmuc Warriors, and your thoughts on that.
Great question, and we've done a lot of work on that. And I'm against mascots because I see them as visual terrorism. And we did whole segments on this. It's evidence-based proof that mascots are harmful to not only Native people, but also in learning capacities for people of non-Native ancestry. So they're very harmful in so many different facets. And we just did a panel on that recently as well. It's a very big topic. And there are still people who still think it's okay. And we've kind of had a very intense dialogue, and this dialogue continues. But so the short answer is I think they should go, and because they don't do anything to push the conversation forward. Yes?
I'm from the Mann Historical Society, and in all of our records there are numerous, accounts of the King Philip War and all of the things that, took place, and really glorifying the English colonists. And it's missing in our museum and in our storytelling to tell the real story about who owned the land and where did those people go. And for me, it's really important to stop the glorification and make sure that there's a balance when we tell our history. So it was in this spring I spent a lot of time with Kathy Taylor, who is affiliated with the Narragansett tribe. But we walked places, we tried to identify important areas, but we have no clue how to tell that story. And anything that we can tap into, that will help us to add that, to our own story would be, beautiful. So
Yes.
I think it's an important.
And that's great. And we're living some of my, I'm 53 now, and as I said, I spent a lot of time in various college campuses around the country, and I just love the energy I'm seeing for all the youth fighting for social justice. And sometimes I tell them not to be so angry, but I respect where they're coming from, and I bring them up because I remember growing up in the 70s and 80s. And so from what I'm experiencing from my perspective is a beautiful thing what's happening, because I'm seeing things I thought I'd never see in my lifetime already. And I mean, that's like across the board in terms of just what you said, that people want to hear the Native side of it. That was not something I heard as a kid in class. I was told by the teacher, the Indians are gone, and you guys you don't exist. And so this is like, wow, okay, it's going to really happen. And I keep seeing that growing. I keep seeing that momentum moving towards justice, moving towards more equity. We have some amazing indigenous writers and scholars out there today who are just really powerful speakers around here, such as Lisa Brooks, who is a great writer. And so I suggest anybody who's interested to hear more the stories of, get into different Native writers who are all around us right here in New England. Right here.
my mother's side, fourth great grandmother was a full-blooded Indian of the Natick tribe of the Nipmucs. So I've done my, genealogy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But, I would just like to know more of,
Is that the Speen family and all them?
Peas,
Peas? Okay.
Patience Peas.
Oh, yes, I know the name.
And
Wow.
so I'd kind of like to know more about that area. And I know that they spend a lot of time in Mendon. They used to summer in Mendon from Natick. And I'm just,
Again, like I said, all this is so rich, right? And she's bringing up Natick, and Natick is a very significant area because a couple things. Number one, that's where we were transported to Deer Island. You're probably familiar with that.
yeah,
So
I'd like to know more about that.
talking about Deer Island, so we had so the reservation started in Massachusetts, right? The idea of putting Indians in one place and Christianizing them started here, and so. During the King Philip's War, these Christianized Indians didn't fight against the English. They signed treaties that says we won't fight. But the General Court of Massachusetts decided that, well, we can't tell them apart, we can't trust them. So much like what happened to Japan, this happened in 1675 with the Nipmuc people. And they rounded up, they took them from Natick and rounded them up and put them on Deer Island where thousands froze and starved to death. And so we have this memorial paddle every year. Of course, we can't do it this year, but to honor all those people who died there. And I've been working with the Montessori school in Natick as well. Again, it's about education, right? So what we're working on is talking about in the post office.